Today is April 1st, 2022. We're going to Zoom again. And when we left off last week, we had talked about Mark's birth, and then we were talking about kind of loosely life in the 50s, that we were jumping around to other time periods. We talked a little bit about, we talked about May and Sam, and then a little bit about camping. So I don't know what stories you have to tell for this period, but kind of the next big event that I'm aware of after that we don't know about is kind of the birth of my mom, Judi. So, and that's one thing I wouldn't mind hearing about. And if there's anything else between, basically Mark's birth and my mom, if, stories about Mark or anything, we can, happy to.
Okay, Judi. Okay, Mark was born July 4th, 1952. Judi followed by 2 years and roughly 2 months, October 27, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah, 1954. I was still working at Lockheed Aircraft Service, only at that time I was dealing with the prospects of leaving the job, because in the fall of 1954, Lockheed Aircraft Service was in the process of planning a move eastward about 40 miles to Ontario, to the Ontario International Airport. In conversations with Esther, she didn't want to leave the area, neither did I. 40 miles in was 1954. We didn't have the national highway system, so it was going out a highway east, and I had to start preparing to look for a new job. In the meantime, I was still working at Lockheed Aircraft Service, and the birth of Judi followed literally the same script as Mark. I went to work one day. Esther was about to deliver, and of course I got the proverbial phone call from May, only this time, instead of going to the Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, she went to, I believe, Queen of Angels Hospital.
Is that located?
That was located between, let's just say, Vermont Avenue, which is a North and South Street, and eastward to the downtown area, maybe halfway. I'm not sure what the major street, east-west street was.
I was just curious if it was over the hill. I'm guessing there wasn't too many hospitals in the valley at that time yet.
No. Okay. The doctor, her attending doctor, was different. Let's see, what was his name? I can't think of it. He had a brother who had some notoriety, who was a member of the Jack Benny TV show. He was actually their presiding tenor, and I can't think of his name. maybe you can search Jack Benny in the early 1950s on his TV or radio show about who his tenor was. In any event, eventually we'll get to that. But this doctor was his brother. So at the time, I might have been aware about it, but I don't remember. This time, this second birth for Esther was not dragged out as long. I'm not sure what time she was born. In any event, the same procedure. I saw Esther before Judi delivered, but I'm not sure what time it was or how long it took. And in any event, a day or two later, Esther was home, and we now had two youngsters to take care of, and we've all been through this before. We know how it works.
Yeah, but there's still differences between the different children.
So now we have two youngsters. Dealing with them, we had the same thing going on as before. The first thing of notoriety that I can deliver about Judi, she was about 16, 17, 18 months old. She was very small, but very agile. She walked it a little over a year, and she did very well in moving around. I remember a time when she was maybe 13 or 14 months old. My cousin Stanley came over with his wife Ann, and they also had a child. I don't know whether it was their first or second child. I don't remember. But I do know that at age 14, Judi was like self-propelled. She got around upright. She would fall a lot, boom, down on her bottom, but she'd get right back up again. I remember Stanley commenting, I got a kid that's older than her that can't crawl yet, and she's walking. So life moved on, and one Saturday, I was working in the garage. I had a a problem with a lawnmower. I'm not sure what the problem was, but I was sitting on the floor of the garage, taking the lawnmower apart. That is, removing the roller to get at what I had to get at to fix it. This particular, most lawnmowers then had a one-piece roller. If it was a 14-inch lawnmower, it had a roller that went the width of the rotary cutting blades of the lawnmower. But on this particular lawnmower, the rollers were segmented. They were 3-4 inches long, 2-3-4 inches long. I'm not sure. There might have been 6 or 8 rollers, probably 6. And I took off what I had to take off, and whatever the problem was with the rollers, I fixed. Now it's putting them back together again, and I was short a roller. Now, during all of this, I'm fixing the lawnmower. Judy's sitting in the garage. She was sitting on a box or something, watching me. And I'm looking around for the missing roller. And I asked Judy, "Did you see the roller?" And she nodded, yes. I says, "Do you know where it is?" And she nodded, yes. I said, and I looked around and I'm wondering myself, I didn't move the roller. What'd she do with it? So it was like, "Can you take me the roller?" And she nodded again, didn't say a word. She grabbed either my thumb or my big finger, and she led me off. We went in the house, walked through the kitchen, turned left at the door, and walked through the den, into the hallway, into the bathroom. We walked in the bathroom, and she pointed at the toilet. I said, "Did you put the roller in the toilet?" And she nodded again. And I thought, well, what is going to happen now? Okay, to cut to the chase. Of course, we'll never know why she threw the little roller in the toilet, but I could just see a corner of the roller. It was too big to pass through the siphon part of the toilet. It just couldn't go through the narrow passageway. So what I had to do is take the toilet off, remove the water tank, went over the toilet, took it out, took the toilet outside, and from the bottom I could see the one end of the roller, and I could see the other end of the roller from looking down on the toilet itself. So I tried to put a stick in there to force it through one way, and it wouldn't. And I kept banging on it, and before you know it, I broke the toilet. Well, that was that. So off I went to the local hardware store. I believe it was on Sepulveda Boulevard. I don't remember the cross street. Went down there, bought a toilet, and I remember it was $119, as closest to what I had. At first, I thought I could buy a bowl, but toilets don't come in bowls; they come in sets, bowls and water tanks. So that's the story of Judy and the broken toilet.
Nice.
Yeah, life moved on. The kids got older.
Were they easy kids? Were they
What?
easy? Were the kids easy to or they're challenging or
Well, any kid can be challenging. Of course, by now, Mark was almost 4 years old. Judy was approaching 2 years. We had the ups and downs of them. They both got sick. We took them to the doctor. They cut their fingers. They fell and cried. Yeah, it's not challenging. That I would like to think we were good parents, because look how they turned out. They I don't know whether they experimented with drugs. I had no evidence that they did.
Hopefully not as at the F2 and 4. Hopefully they didn't do that at 2 and 4.
What?
Hopefully they didn't do that at 2 and 4, you know.
No, no, no.
Yeah, I'm just
It's, something like that at that time first probably appeared in junior high school.
yes, I know.
Okay, let's move forward to
Okay.
when they were Judy was either 4 or 5 years old, and Mark was 6 or 8. Let's go with 5 and 7. We decided to go on a vacation. What happened now is I was no longer working at Lockheed Aircraft Service. I left them in the fall of 1955. What happened is in the fall of 1955, I was looking for another job, and I had eventually I had 2 offers for a job. Now, while I was working at Lockheed Aircraft Service, one of the fellows there was starting his own outside business. Now, in the early 50s, this was after the Korean War ended. Let's see, let me get myself oriented here. Yeah, after the Korean War ended, there was a big growth in the economy. One of several, I would guess. And one of the fellows was doing a side business, and what he was doing was he owned a house with a lot of property on it. He owned a house on a big plot of land. He had a lot of room in the back, and he was fixing cars and doing other things like that. And what had happened is a friend of his had a friend who had a truck and trailer, a tractor and trailer. The trailer was made of mostly aluminum. It had a long steel chassis with a semi-trailer. That is, it had an axle at the rear, and the front coupled to a fifth wheel on a truck. There was no front wheel on it, or I should say front axle. And while his friend was backing the trailer into building of some kind, apparently he tore the side of the trailer apart. It was a covered trailer that is had aluminum sides and an aluminum top, sheet aluminum. And what it was, inside they had vertical reinforcements on it, and the two had panels on it that were roughly 3 feet wide and about 8 feet tall. And for this single axle trailer was a little over 20 feet long. So it was constructed very much like an airplane, that is with rivets. And what this guy decided to do, he brought it to him, and he started repairing it. And he did it himself. It took him a bit of a time. He replaced he drilled out all the old rivets, took out the torn panel, used what was left of the panel as a pattern for a new panel, and he cut that out and he riveted it together. And the job was successful, and he started getting repeats. Now he needed more people. Now we're working in his backyard, and occasionally I would go over there. He was paying me something like $2.50 an hour, which was almost as much as I was getting at Lockheed Aircraft Service. In any event, he did so well. He was setting himself up to go to business to repair the body of aluminum trailers. And actually, he did that. He became quite a big company. I chose not to go with him because at the time, other prospects looked better. Okay, so that's what's happened with that. Now, as I also got a tip from another friend about Rocketdyne. Now, when North American aviation in the 50s, 1950 maybe, it might have been late 49, they bought up a lot of space at the top of the hill between that separates Simi Valley and the San Fernando Valley. They had contracts now to build the motor, the rocket engine motor for the first rocket that we were going to have. They had a facility going up there already. They had built 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They had built 9 rocket engine test stands in 3 areas, and we're working on a 4th area. I was given a phone number of a man who was department head of one of the facilities on the Rocketdyne facility there. Rocketdyne is what North American named that company, and he was in charge of a building and a research area called Components Test Laboratory, CTL. And somebody gave me his phone number, and I called him up. I told him about my credential. I've already reiterated previously how I went to school at California Flyers, and I was a licensed CAA airframe and power plant, unlicensed CAA power plant and airframe specialist. And he seemed to like my credentials. I went over to see him, and actually he lived right on the street just behind Bay and Sam, running parallel with Van Horn on the street. Just north of him is where this guy lived, in a house that was only one house away from being directly behind the house that me and Sam lived in. Anyway, I went over there and he interviewed me, and I remember he was very accommodating. They brought out some coffee and cut up some sandwiches and made me feel real comfortable. And in any event, he hired me, and I went to work for them. And this was in the fall of 1955, and I was to work for them for 11 years until the summer of 1966. After the landing on the moon, which I think happened late in July of 1966. Okay, let's take a few minutes break now.